I write about disappearance because with the disappearance there's hope. And hope can be the greatest thing in the world, or it can be the cruelest. Hope can crush your heart like it's an eggshell. I don't really know how to explain I like to think of it as a love affair between France and me. I mean, it's so flattering, it's so wonderful. I'm still shocked by it every single time that I come here. I always think no one's going to show up, no one's going to care, and there's always a wonderful line of people. I don't really know how to explain it. I'm extremely grateful. As an artist, I think I've had some of my best collaboration. I don't really collaborate very much because I write novels by myself, but I think taking sort of the Americanism of Telmo in the book, and then when Guillaume Canet added the French touch, that ended up being a wonderful mix, and I think that's probably part of what's going on. But it's just, you know, I compare it to when you were in school. You had a crush on the beautiful girl in the class, and you would look at her all the time, and she wouldn't look at you. And then one day she looks at you, and that's kind of how I feel about, especially the city of Paris. I did, yes. You don't, but I did, yes. I know the beginning and I know the end. I almost know nothing in between. And that's how I always kind of write. It's a journey, but I know the beginning of the journey, I know the ending. I just don't know where I'm going to go during that journey. I may go to China, I may go to the Suez Canal, I don't know, but I'll always end up where I think I will. So yes, in the beginning of the book, I knew the answers behind Wendy and Dan, which maybe helps me fool you a little bit as I'm writing. Well, I have 4 children, and you know, the first time you know fear in your life is when your first child is born. Before that, you've never really learned about fear. That said, consciously, I don't have much fear for a father. I mean, I go through all the things, but I think a lot of it goes out in my books, that I'm able to express it through the books. But these are the issues that I then will take and go, what if? Because I'm seeing them every day in my own community. The same worries about the kids growing up in the world that we're living in. And I kind of take those things and I try to find a very compelling and twisty plot that will fit that. All the questions that I raise in every novel, but especially this one, I don't have an answer to. I don't want to give you an answer even if I had one, but it's because it's a hard question. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. I don't like extremes. I don't like yes and no. Yeah. I don't like black and white. I like the gray. And so I raise these issues. How far do you go in watching your kid? If someone says to me, no, here's what you do. Your kid is never allowed on the computer. Or, I never watch my kid on the computer. He should do it every once. Both of those extremes make me equally nervous, because anybody who has easy answers, that's always a danger. So I like to explore those sort of gray areas. And I think that's what makes most of the books are a little more compelling in that way, in that these questions are not so easy. And hopefully, I want to make your pulse race. I love that the French call me the master of the white knight. That's very flattering. But the way to do that is by making you question, by making you ask these sort of, wonder about these things the same way that I do. I don't really know an answer. If I knew the answer, maybe I would write it. And I don't want to give you the answer anyway. You have to find it yourself. I think we've always been vulnerable to it. I think we've always been susceptible to believing the worst and accepting things at face value. The problem is with the internet, there's more of it. And we see it not just, if you just hear it on the street, maybe you don't pay as much attention, but for some reason when you read it on a computer screen, you have a tendency to accept it, even though it maybe has less validity to somebody who's just walking down the street. I guess I could write anything, but I don't necessarily want to.
Right.
I think you need, to write a book about my view on family would, I think, be boring. If I could do the same thing in a structure that's a story that's going to be compelling and gripping and entertaining, that's my job. And that's the sort of beef I would have with sometimes what they call mainstream or literary writers now, is that they forget that you're supposed to be telling a story. And every great novel that has survived 100 years also tells a story. Dostoevsky, Wilde, Dumas, Hugo, Shakespeare, whatever, they always remember to tell us, there's not very few Shakespeare books don't have a courtroom scene. Books, they're plays, but that's what, all the great writers that you loved as a kid, all the great writers who people grew up on and sort of worship and respect that are going to survive a long period of time, they do have story. And so I can do I hope I can try to do all those sort of things, but in context of a story that's going to be compelling and gripping and entertaining. I think there's a couple reasons. One is I love that. I don't have a great attention span myself, so I want to be gripped and held on and compelled all the time. I like to read that, and I want to write that. But yes, 100 years ago, you had nothing to compete with as an entertainment or as an art, whatever you want to call it. You had nothing else really to compete with like it. There was no now there's TV, there's movies, there's the internet, there's DVDs, there's DVRs, there's computer games. My kids are always playing these fantasy computer games, or they're playing the new Pokemon game or Call of Duty, where they can drop into fake worlds. So as a writer, I have to compete with all of that. Plus I have to compete with other novels, of course, too. So it's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. It means that we have to, we say in English, up our game. We have to get better against our competition. If you're playing in a football match and you're playing better competition, you have to up your game. I have to up my game as a writer. Yeah, one of the things I'm talking about in quite a little bit is the more recent financial crisis, and a lot of fathers in my town lost their jobs. And when a father loses his job, a man loses his job, a woman too, but I'm talking about right now this sort of male ego, he also loses his identity quite often. And these men really suffered, and I wanted to show it in both a heartbreaking but also comical way. I thought it would be a good place to have a little comic relief in the book as well, how these men react. And so I invented this Fathers Club, because I started to see, I work in coffee shops around my town, and usually I'm the only father there because that's where I'm working. And more fathers starting to show up, starting to talk with each other, starting to commiserate with each other. And so I invented for this book something called the Fathers Club, which is a group of these men who get together at a local Starbucks. One wants to become now a rap singer. One still wears his tennis clothes like he's going to go playing. And how they're each handling this crisis with their families differently.